I pled guilty in federal court to felonies for the benefit of, at the direction of, and in coordination with individual number one. And for the record, individual number one is President Donald J. Trump. I have lied, but I am not a liar. And I have done bad things, but I am not a bad man. I have fixed things, but I am no longer your fixer, Mr. Trump. And I am going to prison and have shattered the safety and security that I tried so hard to provide for my family.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. Until yesterday, the only person having to pay the legal consequences for interfering in the 2016 election with the illegal cover-up of hush money payments made to porn star Stormy Daniels was that man, Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen. Cohen went to prison for what you just heard him describe, crimes that benefited and were directed by individual one, Donald Trump. It's no longer the case. Now, individual one has been convicted by a jury of his peers. Yesterday's dramatic and consequential verdict in the election interference hush money case came down swiftly and decisively. Donald Trump was found guilty on all 34 felony counts. Michael Cohen's former boss is now the first ex-president to be convicted of a crime for which he will be sentenced on July 11th. Michael Cohen was the one who paid the hush money to help Donald Trump in the final days of the 2016 campaign. Michael Cohen was the one who was later repaid in installments, 12 of them, with some checks signed by Donald Trump himself from the Oval Office. Michael Cohen was the one who tied Trump directly to those payments. He was also the one who has been attacked repeatedly and ceaselessly by Donald Trump and Trump's legal team. The ending of Trump attorney Todd Blanche's closing argument went like this, quote, "You cannot send someone to prison. You cannot convict somebody based upon the words of Michael Cohen." But that's not what this case was at all. It wasn't just Michael Cohen's word or testimony. He was the prosecution's star witness, but the state built a meticulous case with documents and multiple witnesses and multiple pieces of evidence. Michael Cohen spoke about that last night when he joined all of us soon after the verdict was announced.
What ultimately was demonstrated was the fact that all of the testimony by the other witnesses that I had involvement with corroborated what I've been saying for 6 years. And all of the evidence, the documentary evidence, emails, text messages, documents themselves, again, corroborated what I've been saying for 6 years.
6 years. Just stop for a second. Close your eyes and remember what you were doing 6 years ago. 6 years. Today marks 9 years to the day that Donald Trump descended those golden escalators, to announce his run for the presidency. Well, he stood there again this morning in Trump Tower as a man now convicted of felony charges. This morning, he railed against the justice system that has finally held him accountable. While he acknowledged he's still under a gag order, Trump did go after Michael Cohen.
By the way, this was a highly qualified lawyer. Now, I'm not allowed to use his name because of the gag order. But, you know, he's a sleazebag. Everybody knows that. Took me a while to find out. But he was effective. He did work. But he wasn't a fixer. He was a lawyer. You know, they like to use the word fixer. He wasn't a fixer. He was a lawyer. At the time...
You say tomato, I say tomato. The conviction of Donald J. Trump on 34 felony counts is where we begin this hour with his former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen. He's the host of the Mea Culpa and Political Beatdown podcast. He's the author of the books Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics, and Disloyal, a memoir. How you doing?
Hanging in there. I had the pleasure of watching the press conference today, was wondering whether or not that gag order was still actually in place. Because, once again, Donald just violated. He doesn't care about the law. He doesn't care about anything other than venting, like a petulant child.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is nothing that he said was true. You know, Mary Trump said it best yesterday. He's now unhinged. And to listen to the rambling meandering, just like Todd Blanche during his cross-examination, that rambling, meandering sort of non-thought thought. That's all that he did. I think he embarrassed himself, not just in front of the folks that were working at the Trump Organization that were there filling the spaces.
That's who those folks are, right?
Yeah. But he's also embarrassing himself in front of anyone that was watching. He accomplished nothing with that. Zero.
What do you want now? Do you want closure? Do you want to move on? Do you want to never see or hear his name again? What do you want?
Now, unfortunately, what I want, I don't think I'll ever attain. I want peace. You can't have peace when Donald Trump is around, because one of the things he talks about in many of his books, it's a common theme. If you hit him, and it's in his mind that he's being hit, he needs to strike back at you 10 times harder. He needs to hurt you 10 times harder. And so long as the two of us exist on this planet at the same time, he will constantly seek to hurt me. And I will never be a punching bag to Donald Trump or anyone.
What do you think he's feeling right now?
I think he's incredibly unnerved. He's not 100% sure what's actually going on, and that's the part that's really scaring him the most. Nobody's telling him the truth. So, Donald, if you're watching, here's the truth. The truth is you're in trouble. The second truth is that you will be found guilty. Now, whether or not you end up doing any time behind bars, you've heard me say this before, which is I would prefer you not to be, and not because you don't deserve it, but rather because you possess secrets, you possess national security information that puts the rest of us at risk. And I don't trust you with that information behind bars, believing that you would sell that information for a bag of tuna or for a book of stamps. And that's my biggest concern. So a home confinement scenario would be just fine, the way I see it. And I believe that Judge Merchan, who I've said to several people today, I find him very Solomonian. He's really very even-keeled. He's incredibly judicious and respectful of the process, something Donald is not. I believe that he will make the right decision, and the right decision will be not just for Donald, but really for respect to the office of the presidency.
That he once held, or that he seeks
that he once held.
What is going to happen to Donald Trump now?
Yeah, look, I'm not a prognosticator, though I've been pretty good at it so far, to pat myself on the shoulder, if I may. I think Donald loses, and I think he loses by a landslide. While a lot of people may right now openly claim that they're supporting Trump, I think when you're standing in the voting booth and you say to yourself, can I really vote for a guy who is a convicted felon, who is already been charged with assault, in fact, rape? Can you go with somebody who is absolutely unhinged and says the wild and crazy and stupid things that this man says? Can you really put America in that position with whether it's adversaries or allies, with foreign dignitaries, where he will disrespect anyone? He will do anything so long as it benefits him. He will sell, as I believe that he has already done, shown top secret documents to adversaries or to folks who have no right to see those documents. We know that the Australian billionaire at Mar-a-Lago, the fact that the guy's a billionaire doesn't give him rights that you and I do not have. He did not have the right to see those documents. But Donald started waving them around like they were a comic book or, you know, some just random piece of paper. They are not. They are secrets that put American service persons in harm's way. One was about a nuclear sub and how many nuclear warheads are on that specific vessel. Are you crazy? I mean, who tells anybody that? It makes no sense. How about the fact that during Helsinki, he had no representative with him, And he was talking to Vladimir Putin, a KGB agent who was so much smarter than him, with Putin's translator. And he's just randomly talking. And you know, the problem with Donald Trump when he talks, he says things. And that's the danger.